He had a near-death experience some years ago, and I've actually came across a lot of his work over the years on YouTube, and I was thrilled when I reached out to him and he agreed to speak to our chapter this afternoon. Without further ado, I would like to hand it over to him. He's going to, as you can see, he has videos and some slides. He's going to be telling us his story and the research that he's been doing. And then we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So please be ready to ask questions. I'll put them in the chat so that we're ready to go. And with that, I'd like to warmly introduce then Dr. Alan Hugenot. Welcome.
Thank you very much. So today I'm going to put up a lot of slides. And for those of you that want to, you can take photos with your video camera or whatever of the slides. All the scientific information is in the slides. I'm going to talk to you, and I'm going to talk, off the cuff. Sometimes I'll read some of the things that are on the slide, but mostly I'm just going to tell the story. Many of you may have heard me speak before at IANDS conventions or things like that. What I'm going to talk about today is the scientific proof for postmortem consciousness survival. And this is something, I had a near-death experience 52 years ago when they didn't call it a near-death experience. And at that time, that was 5 years before Raymond Moody wrote his book, Life After Life. And their process, the psychiatrists, if you had an idea like a near-death experience, well, you were just delusional. And so Reagan hadn't gotten rid of the situation in 1981 where they finally let the people out of the nut houses. And so the psychiatrist wanted to put me in the nut house. So I'm very grateful to be speaking today, because today you want to hear what I have to say. And in those days, they wanted to put me in the nut house. They didn't manage to do that. My orthopedic surgeon got me out of the hospital. I was in the hospital. I was in a motorcycle wreck. I was in the hospital for 33 days. And he got me out of the hospital by running into the room, grabbing me, putting me in a wheelchair, throw my clothes in my lap, still wearing the hospital gown, out the back door, down the freight elevator, where my mother had the car, and we took off. So I got out of their jurisdiction, and they couldn't put me in the nut house. As late as 2004, I know of a near-death experiencer where the doctor sent her to the Mayo Clinic till she stopped talking about her NDE. So that kind of stupidity is still out there. Is there any proof of life after death? Well, that's something that some of the world's scientists have been unsuccessfully attempting to demonstrate post-mortem consciousness survival for the last 140 years. William James, Sir Oliver Lodge, Dr. Charles Robert Richet, the Nobel Prize winner for 1913. They've all been trying to prove this stuff. There's Oliver Lodge. And they have published overwhelming subjective anecdotal evidence, but science doesn't like that. What science likes is objective evidence. Subjective evidence is just insufficient. It's what you see in your head. The materialist scientists don't quite get is that what you're seeing in your head is subjective. It's what you're seeing. It's your own thoughts. And so you think you can be objective. Well, physicists learned long ago with what we call the observer principle, that the observer affects the situation. So subjective evidence, however, in our materialist science viewpoint, is only useful if it's used as a backup for objective evidence. And there's reasons for this. And one of those reasons is it prevents personal superstitions from being claimed as truths. The gold standard in honest science is objective evidence. And objective evidence, you have the fact that's hypothesized, it has to be a logical possibility, like a logical possibility. Consciousness could survive outside the body. That's a logical possibility. There must be evidence for it. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And there must be no evidence against it. And this is where materialist scientists think this is proven, that the brain creates consciousness. It's never been proven. It's a presumption. It's not, there's no science behind it whatsoever. We think, well, hey, if we hurt the brain, it no longer works. No, we're hurting, if you think about it this way, we're hurting the TV set, and yeah, you no longer get the signal, but the signal's still out there because the consciousness is outside the body. So if you destroy the brain, obviously it's not going to receive the signal any longer. Think about it that way. But the fact is, there's no evidence against this business of consciousness survival. Research in the natural sciences has found that two kinds of objective evidence count. One is laboratory data resulting from carefully controlled experiments, even though the observer is involved in the experiment, or clinical data collected from controlled and monitored medical practice. And unfortunately, this requirement kind of got rid of all their subjective evidence about talking to people on the other side and everything else that Oliver Lodge and William James and everybody were looking into, because it wasn't objective evidence. But today we have objective evidence. 21st century medical practice has given that. The objective clinical evidence required for scientific proof of postmortem consciousness survival, having clearly shown that numerous patients under controlled and monitored conditions have actually died, stayed dead for some significant time, even several hours or longer, and subsequently revived to resume a normal life. Now, we have near-death experiences, and we have stories and anecdotes that we all tell, our narratives, where people have been dead for 3 days sometimes, but we don't have this monitored in a medical situation. Now they actually have this monitored in medical situation where they can prove they were dead for some time. Now, what does dead, what's the definition for dead? How do we define that? That's the biggest problem we have. Dead patients, according to our thinking, are those that have no brainwave, no EEG coming out of their brain, and they got no heartbeat, no EKG. They have a declining body temperature. They're not breathing. They have no life-saving or resuscitative measures like cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR. None of that's in use. They're stone cold dead. Their cadaver is laying there with nothing going on. Okay, that's dead. So that's clinical death. Modern cardiac arrest patients and those suspected of pending cardiac arrest who are in intensive care are hooked up to all the modern sensors. And when they do have a spontaneous heart attack, their electroencephalogram, their EEG, flatlines as their brain loses oxygen and ceases to function. Their electrocardiogram also flatlines because their heart stopped and the respiration ceased. And the entire sequence of events is recorded, including the time. At this point, they are, by all our standard definitions, stone cold dead, with no circulation, no respiration, and medical science previously presumed that arriving at this set of terminal conditions was the end of consciousness. But due to the success of many resuscitation techniques, medical practice recently changed to calling this terminal condition clinical death. Now we say, oh, he's clinically dead, as if that makes a difference. They're really dead, okay? And that's the point that's so important here. Recently, the practice of hypothermic cardiac arrest therapy has been successfully bringing people back from clinical death, even several hours later. And I mean several hours after they died. And these re-enlivened cadavers return to actual life as the same personalities they were before, with no physiological or mental losses. This is literally reincarnating the consciousness into the same physical body, and it occurs easily when careful hypothermic treatments are utilized. They have kept the physical body from deteriorating. They have to put them in cold storage. If the body deteriorates, you got a problem. So And there's the science behind all that. You got about 10 seconds and the cells start to spoil. But if you can cool the body down below 93 degrees Fahrenheit, and if this process can be started soon after the victim died, within 40 minutes to an hour, the cadaver can remain clinically dead in a state for several hours, totally absent any circulation or respiration. And then they can bring him back. When they decide to bring him back, they warm them back up by circulating their blood that's been warmed artificially, get them back up to about 93 degrees, and they can put the paddles on them and contact and start their heart, and that will call the consciousness back into that cadaver. The whole point is keeping the body from spoiling. Okay, well, that's very interesting. Like I said, it can be rewarmed with no loss of physiological or mental abilities. Many of these stone cold patients also retain clear memories. They had a near-death experience, clear memories of what the doctors were doing while they were physically dead. So now we're going to watch a video. That guy right there is Sam Parnia, and he's written a very wonderful book called Erasing Death in 2013. Sam's a doctor who works in this resuscitation business and brings people back to life. And he's going to discuss this in this interview, so we're just going to watch it. Come on, there we go. Whoops, escape. Go back to Sam Parnia's video. I got to go back here. Where's this video? So, there we go. Let's get back there. Let's turn it on again. This video is supposed to play. Didn't play. Escape. Escape. Go back. Escape. Let's go back to Sam Parnia's video. I don't know why the video is not playing, folks. Well, you got to go find this video, and I think I have it referenced on the last card.
Sam,
there it goes.
You and I are fascinated by.
Oh, come on. We almost had it. We're going to get it here. Let's go back. Okay.
Sam, you and I are fascinated by consciousness. I did a doctorate in neuroscience. You are a physician. You have taken a very interesting approach by studying consciousness during cardiac arrest. What can be learned about consciousness during what could be defined as a near-death experience?
Well, you see, consciousness is really, I think, the most important question for us to try to address. And many physicians, many researchers are looking at this from a different perspective, different angles. But first we have to define what we're talking about. What we're really discussing is what makes Sam into who he is, what makes Robert into who he is, or anybody else into who they are. Mm-hmm. So the self. And of course, as you know, from the time of the ancient Greeks, they called that entity the psyche, which was later translated into the word soul. But in effect, what it really means is the same terms for the different terms for the same thing, I should say. What is it that makes me into who I am? And today in science, we call that consciousness. Now, of course, there have been different opinions about consciousness because it is the biggest mystery. And some people have proposed that consciousness is essentially a product of bodily functions from Aristotle onwards. And others, such as Plato, have suggested that consciousness, the self, the soul, the psyche, whatever you want to call it, me, the self, is something separate from bodily processes.
Certainly the predominance of opinion today, certainly among scientists, is that it is a bodily process.
Absolutely. So most scientists have sort of leaned towards the Aristotle's kind of viewpoint. Now, what's fascinating is that, and this is a big problem in science, is that you can never really separate consciousness from brain activity. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. Which ones comes first? They work together. If you study patients that I work with, so I'm an intensive care physician, my goal is to prevent people from dying in the first place when they become critically ill. But unfortunately, whether we like it or not, some people do go beyond the threshold of death. And cardiac arrest, it's very important to appreciate, is death. There is no difference between cardiac arrest and death from a biological perspective. So what happens when someone has a cardiac arrest is the heart stops beating, they stop breathing, and within moments, the entire bodily function, including the brain, shuts down. Mm-hmm. So that's how we write the death note, we declare someone as being dead. However, through advances in science in the last 50 years or so, we're now able to push back that boundary and potentially bring back a whole person. I won't bore you with the details of how, but CPR being the most basic format, and then there's a lot more to it. So essentially, the reason why this is important is that when somebody's gone through a cardiac arrest, when they've technically gone beyond the threshold of death, we have a situation where, whether we like it or not, the brain shuts down. So now you can study the mind, consciousness, the psyche, the soul, the self, whatever you want to call it, in a clinical context where the brain has been switched off. Now, of course, we would expect there to be no consciousness present when the brain has shut down. That would be common sense. However, over the last few decades, thousands, if not millions of people from all over the world have anecdotally reported being conscious, being aware, having memory, being able to see things, and recalling in precise detail what doctors and nurses were doing, conversations, clothing, etc., except they're recalling things from a period when their brain had flatlined, they had gone beyond the threshold of death. So what we study is essentially those experiences. We're trying to understand whether those experiences are real. Do they really occur when the brain has shut down, which is a complete paradox? Or is it that perhaps the experience is occurring either just before the brain is shut down or after the brain has recovered? However, to go back to your original question, the significance is that if you can demonstrate that consciousness can function when the brain is not functioning, then of course that becomes very important, because it tells us that perhaps, going back to the ancient Greek philosophers, maybe Plato was right rather than Aristotle.
Okay, methodologically, I would have some serious questions about how you know that conscious experience, even if it were timed to when the brain had flatlined, whether that was really indicative of that the brain really was flatlined in terms of its capacity to receive information, or was the information right before then or right after that? So, I mean, methodologically, it would seem that for such an extraordinary conclusion that the conscious memories or experiences or feelings was truly apprehended independent of the physical brain and sense organs. And that's an extraordinary claim. You would think that there is some mundane explanation for it.
Well, of course, I haven't made any claims. I simply explained where the significance of the work is, because one of two things is going to come out of this. Either you're going to demonstrate that in essence, what you said, that the experiences are occurring when the brain is online, and somehow the brain is functioning and the experience is occurring. However, if you look at what people say, those who've gone through it, there is at least a justification to be open-minded and study this and be willing to accept whatever comes out. So again, if we demonstrate the experience occurs when the brain is online, then it's perhaps more suggestive
Before or after, yeah.
That's right, that the experience is being formed through the brain. However, if you can also demonstrate that the experience is occurring when the brain is indeed offline and non-functioning, then you have to question our paradigms, our concepts about the relationship between mind, consciousness, and the brain.
I'm going to assume that what you say is correct, that the consciousness can apprehend information without the brain, which is during this period of flatlining. If that were true, I don't believe that, but I'm going to make the assumption that that's true. Wouldn't that be occurring all the time? Wouldn't it be occurring now? Wouldn't my consciousness being able to do things outside my brain all the time?
Well, just to sort of address the first point that you made, it's important to appreciate that consciousness is a difficult area to study, and I realize that.
Everybody.
Unfortunately, a lot of what I hear people talk about is more of what I classify as philosophical debates. Mm-hmm. And of course, you can always debate anything that one wants to. We could argue things away whichever way we want. Lawyers are great at that, right? But in science, we're looking for empirical evidence. We're looking for evidence to sway our decision. Now, if you look at the study of cardiac arrest, people who've technically gone beyond the threshold of death, there are now a number of cases that have come through, and we've also found them in our studies, where particularly we can pinpoint that consciousness appears to be ongoing when the brain has shut down, and people are able to verify specific details what was happening during that period, which tells us that awareness, consciousness has not shut down, even though the brain has shut down. Do we need more research? Absolutely, we need more research because it's a very, very difficult area to study. Because if you look at it, first of all, the people who go through cardiac arrest, as I said, they have died. And so most of them we cannot bring back for various reasons that I won't bore you with the details. Of those people who come back, their brain immediately, once you restart the heart, their brain immediately swells up, becomes inflamed, and the inflammation goes on for at least 72 hours. And so, of course, it's going to impact your memory circuits. Added to that, physicians such as myself, well-meaning, will give patients drugs, all of which wipe out your memory circuits, right? So now you look at people, say 2 or 3 weeks later after they've recovered, and now we're trying to gain information from them from that period when they were unconscious, when their heart had stopped. Yet we've done all these things to wipe out their memories. So the issue is that most likely more people have these experiences, but they are wiped out due to the various effects that occur afterwards. However, to sort of go back to your sort of point about this, of course, if it is occurring, as you said, if consciousness can occur independent of brain function, why doesn't it happen more often? Well, the fact is, as I explained, the limitation we have is that under almost every circumstance, except for clinical death, brain and consciousness are intricately linked together. So you can't really switch one off and study the other one, except for this circumstance. So if, for example, if it occurs in cardiac arrest, it doesn't mean that it doesn't occur at other times. It's just that you can't separate them out. They're so bonded together that we link them immediately.
If you were sure that your hypothesis that consciousness exists when the brain is flatlined during this period of death before they are resuscitated, what would the implications of that be for what consciousness is?
Well, if we can demonstrate that consciousness can continue when the brain is not functioning, then this is very significant, because what it tells us is that that entity we call the self, consciousness, the psyche, the soul, whatever you want to call it, is in essence, it's not magical. It's not some weird thing. It's a scientific entity, and it most likely has some type of materiality, some sort of physicality, except that it's so subtle that we don't yet have the tools to be able to measure it. So in the same way that 50 years ago or 100 years ago, we didn't have MRI scans that could delve into the brain for up to a couple of millimeters of accuracy, today we don't have the technology to be able to measure thought, to measure consciousness. But it undoubtedly exists. If you think of electromagnetic waves as an analogy, it's a very subtle type of force. It exists right now in this place that we're talking. It's conveying sound and picture from all over the world around us, yet we don't have the receptors to be able to pick it up. But it is very similar to consciousness because it conveys sound, pictures, memories, all the rest of it, right? So essentially, if this is proven through science, that consciousness can exist independent of brain function, what it simply tells us is that the brain is vital, but it is not the producer of consciousness. The brain acts more like the TV set. If we were to take a TV and put it here right now and switch it on, we'd see all kinds of sounds and pictures, but it doesn't mean they're being produced by the TV set. They're coming from somewhere else. And of course, if you were to show a TV set to a 2-year-old or to a dog, they would think the presenter is sitting in the TV. You see little puppies go when if they see a dog, they start playing with it, think it's there. And if you were to be limited, as we are today, we don't know how the whole thing works with consciousness. You could obviously say that I believe people are in the TV set, and you could test your hypothesis by going to the back of the TV, putting a couple of wires out, and you say, look, I just lost the sound. I just lost half the picture. I got fuzziness on it. Therefore, this is all produced from the TV. And that's what we're doing with the brain. Of course, if you get brain lesions, if you get damage or stroke or any kind of disease, you lose aspects of consciousness. But that doesn't mean the consciousness was produced from the brain. It could be, but it also may be that it is.
Okay, so I want to let him go there. I think you get everything that he's saying. So the brain is clearly not getting any oxygen, and it's witnessing things from outside the body, which we in IANDS are pretty well convinced of this. And so what he's saying to us is, where was that consciousness hanging out while the physical body was stone cold dead and the physical brain was not functioning? A simple definition, it was hanging out in the afterlife. It's also clearly outside the 3 dimensions of space plus 1 of time, which defines space-time of our normally observed physical reality. And what Dr. Parnia was saying was, it's so subtle we can't measure it, what thought is, how it is. We have a lot of different traditions that will tell you thought is a thing. It's and once it starts, it lasts. It's a thing like matter is a thing, and it just continues. So what's achieved by this clinical evidence? Okay, those are the things that he's talking about in his book. Consciousness does not require a functioning brain in order to think and record memories. The survival of the consciousness after physical body has clearly died can last for several hours. And while having a near-death experience during that time, their cadavers were clinically dead. The associated consciousness appears to have become entirely discarnate and was operating from a perspective entirely outside the normal observed physical reality. And such post-mortem consciousness survival is apparently normal. That's why all our near-death experiences are coming back and describing this same thing. It's a normal happening to our consciousness. Consciousness then can also reincarnate, this return back to the observed physical reality. That's what we do when we come back from a near-death experience and re-enter our body. We are reincarnating. And Dr. Parnia provides many additional examples in his 213 book. Now, all of this has been replicated by Dr. Pim van Lommel. Pim van Lommel, I mean, I don't know Dr. Parnia, but I do know Pim van Lommel. He is a good friend. He's had dinner at my house. I've had dinner at his house outside of Amsterdam. We talk often on the same platforms, and we've got to know each other quite well. Dr. van Lommel, here's what he said. Recently, the near-death experience has changed medical science. Most people still believe that death is the end of everything, and that used to be my own belief. He's never had a near-death experience himself. But after many years of critical research into the near-death experience, brain function, consciousness, and the basic principles of quantum physics, my views have undergone a complete transformation. I found the most significant finding to be the conclusion of one in the ear: death turned out not to be dead. And I now see the continuity of our consciousness after the death of our physical body as a very real possibility. And before I move on to the next one, Dr. van Lommel did a study with, he's a cardiac surgeon in the Netherlands, and he pulled up 800 different cardiac arrest situations. And out of that, he found 44 that had near-death experiences. And he took those 44, and this is where he could do all the science of, they were in the ER, and they had all their things, you know, the EEG, the EKG, everything was lined up, and they still had these near-death experiences. And so he then published in 2001 in Lancet his findings that the consciousness survives when the brain is dead. So he's replicated everything that Dr. Parnia is talking about. And he's done all that. So now the question comes up. If all that's what Parnia and Pim van Lommel believe with their whole being, can we then communicate with deceased consciousnesses? Now, I had a near-death experience 52 years ago, but in 2006, I decided as a scientist to study communication with the afterlife, or what we call mediumship. I was haunted by this one question. If our consciousness survives death, as proven by quantum electrodynamics and the near-death experience, then shouldn't we be able to communicate with those who have passed on? So I'm a physicist, naval architect, you know, that's what I do. I work with our science, the physics, the way we do it. But in 2006, I started doing that. Now it's over a dozen years later. Well, it's well beyond that. I'm a graduate of a 4-year extension course in mediumship offered by the Morris Pratt Institute, which was established in 1901, which includes on-campus work at Lilydale, New York. Some of you know Lilydale is a spiritualist camp. And I have done 5 7-day courses of graduate study in evidential mediumship at Arthur Findlay College of Psychic Science. And once or twice a week, and once or twice a month, I regularly serve as a medium providing readings from spirit at various spiritualist churches as an evidential medium. And I actually bring through valid details I could not have known, like the names of the spirit communicators, which I could not have guessed, and the relationship of that spirit to the receiver, and how they died, and their occupation, and their hair color, and their personality, as well as messages for the receiver. That's the person, the sitter. And it says for a fee, I also do private appointments. I stopped doing that because you get the public out there and they don't really understand where we are. So I said, if you want a reading from me, Celebrate Life Spiritualist Congregation about once a month. I'm the speaker and the medium, and they're available on Zoom. That's Celebrate Life Spiritualist Community in San Francisco. And so a reading from me, that's where you go. I want to talk about the science of mediumship, and here's another video.
Hi, my name is Arnaud Delorme, and my training is in cognitive neuroscience. My life passion is to study the nature of human consciousness. In my academic research, I studied meditators and the brainwave of meditators, showing that all meditation tradition seems to share some common features and common brainwave activity. And I've created the most popular software to analyze brainwave data. But I became interested in frontier topics, and IANDS was the place to run this research, because there's no place in academia that really bridges between science and spirituality. Have you ever wondered what happens to your consciousness after you die? This is an existential question, and it's barely scratched by the scientific establishment. Yet science is just a method. There is no reason why we wouldn't be able to study these questions using the scientific method. I am specifically interested in mediumship because the claims made by mediums are easily testable by science. It's easy to test if a medium is telling something accurate or not. And so we study the brainwave of mediums. In 2012, we published a paper in the journal Frontier in Psychology, where we showed that the brainwave of mediums are very different from any other mental states they might have. This article was actually in the top 5% of all the scientific articles published on the internet. It shows that even in the scientific community, there is a real interest for this topic. We're planning to do more groundbreaking research at IANDS. In particular, we want to verify previous results and also test new ideas. Our long-term goal is to challenge the scientific establishment and potentially lead to global transformation. This is an ambitious long-term goal, but we will not be able to achieve it without your support. Please help us make this happen. Thank you.
Okay, so we looked at all of that, and Dr. Delorme is talking. And the picture that I'm showing you, I don't know if you can see it with the screen. Okay, that's my head with leaving Delorme's things, okay? And what we were doing was for that study, we were looking at photos of people, and what they were asking us to do as mediums, you look at the photo and they wanted to know, are they alive or dead? I mean, this isn't what mediums do, but we look at the photo, are they alive or dead? And when they're alive, and I said correctly, that's what you see on the left side of the screen. And my visual cortex is in the back of my head where it's red. Okay, when they're dead, do you see how it's darker?
Yes.
Okay, and you see where the energy is? It's all coming in my left ear. And then if you look at the green energy, you see my ears and my nose, okay, that are kind of drawn on the picture. And it's over by my left ear where it's coming in. And so we know a lot about these things in our studying that we're doing. But this is just to show you what, after they wired me up, what happened, what it looked like.
Okay, can I just
Yeah.
can I ask a quick question, if you don't mind going back to that slide, because this is very interesting. So you as a medium are looking at photographs of people who may or may not be deceased, and they are doing you're on an MRI machine or something similar?
Yeah, this is me in 2014. Okay, and I'm wired up. You see how they got me wired up?
Yes.
And then they put me in their Faraday cage. The Faraday cage is a electromagnetically isolated. You're surrounded by a cage. It's actually a room, and just to show that it's not an electromagnetic signal that's coming in with us. Okay, and I particularly talked to a deceased individual on that side, Helen, and when they took me into the Faraday cage, Helen says, "Hey, I'm in here with you. This is a cabinet." And if you know anything about mediumship in the 1890s, they used cabinets. The medium would sit in a cabinet to increase their energy. Well, here they put me in a Faraday cage, and the spirit world is in there with me. So we're increasing the energy. I mean, they called it a cabinet. It's just a great statement. But here's what's going on. This is me in the cage, and they're showing me 400 pictures, alive or dead, alive or dead. And all I can do is I got my 3 fingers and I can touch alive, dead, don't know. And I get really good results. The average mediums are getting around 54% correct. I get 62%. So it just was totally in an altered state and just ignoring everything and alive, dead, alive, dead. I'm letting spirit tell me the answer. I'm not analyzing it. I'm just looking at the picture. Spirit, Helen says, alive, dead. And so while they're doing this, they're showing that the information is coming in by my left ear. It's coming from outside us, and we're receiving it from somewhere. That's what we've proved with this science. Here's some more of Delorme's pictures. And what I want to show you there is if we look at the average up in the left corner, left top corner, it says average. That's what an average person looks like. Okay. Mediumship is right next to it. Not quite looks average, does it? Mm-hmm. Fabrication, if you're making it up, is what you see over here with all the green. And perception, if you're seeing it, is down here. And then recollection is over there. Recollection, fabrication, and perception don't look anything like mediumship, do they? And every medium they put in there when they're doing the mediumship, that's what they get. Very interesting stuff, isn't it?
Can I ask you, is there actually a difference when it's telepathy as opposed to mediumship? Because
that's a science we're looking into. And personally, I think there's no difference. Okay. I think there's absolutely no difference between telepathy if you're picking up something from somebody on the East Coast or the West Coast. I think it's the same thing. ESP is the same thing. Science wants to, they observe it different ways. They observe it in mediumship, they do it ESP, they do remote viewing. I believe it's all the same sense, sixth sense that we don't recognize that we have. We all have it. Mediums aren't gifted in any way. They're just realize they have it. That's the gift. They realize that they can do this. So just how credible are mediums? Well, there are numerous stage show mediums who are entertaining. They lack a lot of credibility. Evidential mediumship is mediumship where you bring through evidence that the person, the sitter you're doing the reading for, recognizes the evidence. This is what I say, things like names and their hair color and what they look like and what their personalities like and stuff like that. So evidential mediumship, and I'm going to talk about somebody else here because I've got this good video, and it's going to talk about Suzanne Giesman. And she's a fantastic evidential medium, but she also has great credibility. Okay, I want to go to.
How would a scientist judge a medium's credibility?
I'm a relatively new medium, is not something that I ever expected to be doing. And I am totally awed when I sit with somebody and give them a reading and connect them with their loved ones that they thought were gone forever.
There's credibility in terms of their history of their lives, of what they've done in their life prior to being medium.
If you had told me back when I was a Navy commander that I would one day be working as a medium, I would have told you you were crazy. Unfortunately, I discovered these abilities as a result of two tragedies: my up close and personal experience on 9/11, and then the death of my stepdaughter. It was in searching for answers to those deep life questions, like why are we here and why do some people have to go so young, that I discovered that I can attune to those who have passed to the other side. And now to be able to do that for other people and to help them overcome their grief, I recognize that as an incredible gift. He just put a baseball in my hand. And this is a signed baseball.
Autographed baseball. Oh my God. That just a couple of days ago, my grandson gave me an autographed baseball. Oh my God. I mean, that was just like 2 or 3 days ago.
You know what that shows you? Your dad is right here. He was there when you got that baseball, and it's still very much near. I got him too.
That is so
The thing I've learned now from doing hundreds of readings is that this life is just one segment of our entire existence. This life is just preparation for what follows. So what we do here and now is so important. We are here to develop our divinity. What that means then is that every moment we should be asking ourselves, am I being the presence of love? Can you feel that love building? That's what it's all about. This whole incredible journey has taught me how important it is to keep our connection with God at all times. You know, I didn't grow up thinking spiritual thoughts at all, but now I really understand who and what we are. And that has just transformed my life from the inside out. So I work hard now to maintain the balance between my work as a medium and now as a spiritual teacher and my life with Ty.
Suzanne is head and shoulders above any other medium that I've known in terms of her prior history. The level of education she had, responsibilities she had, success in the careers that she had, the requirement for ethics, the requirement for care of any medium that I've ever known, and maybe any medium that will ever exist in the future. I mean, this is a truly unique situation and should be recognized as such.
So, Suzanne, I know her quite well. After I first started to do mediumship myself, the organist at the church where I was presenting, I said, you need to go to Arthur Finney College. And then Suzanne told me that you need to go to Arthur Finney College. So I had done my work at Morris Pratt, and I was on the, gave my first demonstration. And that's when Carla, the organist, said, go to Arthur Finney College. And Spirit gave me the following spirit greeting at a spiritualist service before I went to Arthur Finney College. I'm going to share it with you. Okay, is it not moving? Move on. What's happening here? There we go. This is what she said. What I said. I said to Mary Franklin, I said, I've got your, and you can take a picture of what it says there. I've got your, I think she's your grandma, but maybe she's your great grandma. And maybe she's named, I went like this, I said, Margie or Margot, but I said first. And she said that's her other name or her middle name, which she's given me now. And I feel that she died of a pain in the chest and maybe it was breast cancer, and she had brown hair, and she had her hair pulled back into a severe bun. And she apparently died in 1890s, because she keeps saying 1890s to me. And her message is, she still loves you, even if she never knew you. Well, that's the message. And Mary Franklin sitting out there. But she's happy that you came back to spiritualism. What, any of that make sense to you, Mary? Mary said, yes, Alan, that makes a lot of sense. My grandmother on my father's side, and her name is in fact Mary. That's why you were getting really confused, because that's my name too. I believe she died of breast cancer, but I don't know. And actually, you probably thought great-grandmother because of the age differences. I was born quite late in my parents' lifetime, and she died before I was born. And that's what she means when she said, I never knew you. Now, I brought that through. And just like Suzanne said, I'm always amazed, because I don't know how I do it, actually. Later, relatives verified Grandma Mary's nickname and said it was Mamie, which I was trying to say, Mamie. And she died of pleurisy, which is inflammation of the chest cavity. And they sent her picture. The spirit's actual name, Mary. Now, what's that birth? I picked her name out. And of course, Mary was sitting there, so you could discount that if you want. But I said, I want to say Mary, and it doesn't make sense to me, but odds are better than 200. How many names are there for women? Think about that. I pick up a spirit's name. Her nickname, Mamie. I was saying it. Odds of 1 in 25. You put any odds you want on here. Her generation, grandma or great-grandma, odds of 1 in 10. Her relationship, the father's side, odds of 1 in 2. What she died of, inflammation of the chest cavity. And give that anything you want. I'll say 1 in 50. People die of a lot of things. Her hair color, brown, odds of 1 in 5. Her hairstyle, pulled back in a severe bun, odds of 1 in 20. Wow evidence. She knew the sitter, dies before the sitter was born. She never knew the sitter. That's wow evidence. There's her picture. She's showing me 1890s. That picture was taken in 1894. Look at the bun behind her head. Odds of 1 in 25. Most grandparents are of a certain age, so 1890s is fine. But if you run the numbers, that's 312.5 billion to 1 for me to guess this stuff. How in the world do mediums do this? How do we do it? You tell me. All I do is study and sharpen the ability to do it, which is turn off your analytical mind and let your subconscious mind run the show. But even if my statistics are faulty, I couldn't have guessed that. That's before I went to postgraduate school for mediums. Suzanne told me to go to Arthur Findlay College. I completed 12 days of studies there in December of 2014. I went back in August of 2015. I've gone back to July 2017. Then we had COVID. And what about this place? This is Arthur Findlay College. It's Hogwarts. Hogwarts.
Study mediumship in many, many places around the world, but there's only one stands tall. It's the greatest place to learn your skills as a medium.
It is the most amazing, magical place. It's like a different world. Some people call it Hogwarts for mediums.
They bring this mind image to them, you know, we're all running about with little wizards or something, but there's a power within the hall that touches every individual. You can feel the power that's here. It gives you an experience that you get nowhere else in the world.
I believe that people are so afraid to die because they don't know what to expect. And I think a lot of people are afraid that there may be nothing the other side.
Spiritualism started in America in 1848, and Arthur Finlay went to visit a medium. From the experience of sitting in a seance, he became convinced that the afterlife was a reality. When he bought Stansted Hall, he began to build in his mind a hope and a dream to create a college where psychic science could be studied. And it was actually opened in 1968. So Arthur's dream was fulfilled.
The people that I have with me this week come from many different backgrounds and are at many different stages of their unfoldment.
I've thought about what happens when we die since I was little and raised Catholic. I felt that things were a lot different than what I was being told. So I was more open to life after death, especially after my grandmother showed me how to do what she called ghostwriting. Simple holding a pencil and just kind of following it, and a message would come through. I had the curiosity, so I went with it.
Well, if we look back, then I didn't know it was a gift because I saw this man standing in my bedroom when I was a little girl, and that didn't seem like a gift. That was just scary. But I really discovered there was something going on. It's when I had a conversation with a girlfriend that was around 22, and there were colors were appearing around her head. That's what I really understood. There was more. I need answers, and I wasn't getting them anywhere. And every time I would look into a course, they would also always say on their site, study at the Art of Findlay College. So I said, okay, if everybody goes to the Art of Findlay College, that's where I will go. Some of my family don't want to know nothing about it. They even don't really want to contact me or don't want to come visit me anymore. My husband said in the beginning, of all the hobbies you could pick, why this one?
My name is Sapphire. I am a medium and I've been coming to the Arthur Findlay College for about 11 years. It's helped me develop as a person. I've improved my mediumship tremendously because I've built up my power. It takes quite a lot of power and energy to sustain your connection with the spirit world.
The training that we do here is really concentrated, and the work that we do within a week is equivalent to about a year because it is that intensive. Good morning, everyone.
On the course this week, we started off with working psychic level, which is where you make a soul-to-soul connection with the person sitting in front of you. As I I feel this is really your grandfather. And I'm feeling that he would have died when you were quite young. Maybe 7 years.
And then we're going to do an exercise where we start to feel and sense the difference between working with somebody in the physical world and working with someone in the spirit world.
When I'm connecting with the spirit people, I believe I feel what they're trying to impress on me. I'm getting a lot of joy, and I feel it's masculine. Anybody connect with a jovial, baldy kind of guy?
Yeah.
Me, I feel it tingling on my head. Everything comes in with me first in my body. But there's enormous heat in my neck, behind my ear. It's like I'm on fire.
So just move with that feeling a little bit and then just see where it takes you.
So the challenge for me is to hear or see the pictures. Sometimes I have just a flash of an image. Sometimes I have a word. It can come in many, many different ways.
When we start to unfold the powers of the medium, it is a very sensitive time. And through the unfolding process, we become stronger.
I feel like I say, like my legs are like round and then they go like, whoa.
Does anyone have any understanding of that so far?
Yes. We all want a clear picture. It's like fine-tuning. You have to be really, really constant.
As I just keep going with that flow, there's an energy inside me that stirs me up. I want to see his business as he has tools and also good with mechanics.
That's correct.
It like puts fire in you, and that's pretty cool. It's better than sci-fi.
The power of the medium is yours. You may not fully understand it, but you have it. And this is the power to change lives. And you must never, ever give up.
The spirit people train people. Physical tutors do not. We bring out, with spirit's help, the best that is in a person. And in bringing out that best, I find that to do private sittings in a controlled environment is the best thing to do.
Every reading that we undertake is going to be different.
There's no preparation, there's no guarantee.
Sometimes you could be dealing with situations that are just heartbreaking.
There's people perhaps that didn't or couldn't, for whatever reason, say what they needed to say to a loved one.
These are situations that require extensive training. I would never place a student in a vulnerable situation that I would not put myself.
It's like an apprenticeship. Yes, let them practice, but hopefully in the presence of somebody who can guide them.
Hi, good afternoon.
My name is Alice. I live in Wandsworth. I would describe myself as spiritual.
Now, as we conduct the reading for you this afternoon, is it fine for you that I have one of my students here with me who's just going to really observe the structure as we work together?
Yeah.
So just focus upon being in that lovely state of calmness.
I have some questions for my grandmothers. It would be incredible to communicate with them.
I'm starting to hear my voices here of the spirit world. You have a grandmother in the spirit world who would have had the whitest, snowiest hair. Would you understand this? Good, because your grandmother's here.
My father's mother was very elegant, graceful. I sense her around sometimes.
Now, I know that she is very much connected to your father.
Yeah. My father is not very well at the moment, and it would be great, if they had any messages for him.
Can I just say to you, as I feel and sense the energy to do with your father, would there be, or has there been, in any way, any problems to do with his upper body?
Yes. I feel that the college does have its own kind of magic. The very fabric of the building has all that history about it.
So many people pass through these doors, and it touches their lives in the most amazing way.
When you have had that contact from the spirit world, it's like an epiphany. The other side feels like love, pure love. And I think that's how they want us to feel. So I end up thinking about my life a whole different way.
Coming here for many, many people, life changing.
Nobody ever forgets their first time here.
It gives you a greater connection with everything.
So, I went to Arthur Finley 5 different weeks. All of those, excuse me, all of the teachers saw in that video, I know them personally, and I've worked at great depth with them. And that video, most people think, well, what are a bunch of witches? It's Hogwarts, all right. And we really learned to do things like bring through all that evidence that we couldn't possibly know. And I feel it. I feel names. You have to think about that for a second. How in the world do you feel a name? I'm what they call clairsentient. I feel it. And so I just have to say that. How does one feel a name? And I get names for almost every spirit that I talk to. And names come in. Sometimes they come in as one syllable and then another syllable. It's amazing. I don't do it. You have to realize that. I don't do it. I just am the telephone. Okay, so let's go back here and look at these things. what medical evidence exists for consciousness survival. We talked with Sam Parnia, and I showed you what Pint van Bommel's been doing that backs up what Sam Parnia is doing. And these highly specialized hypothermic techniques have been used regularly now for more than 30 years. And I didn't go into all the history of it, just understand it's actually out there. Around 20% of those who come back through the cardiac arrest program that Sam's talking about have near-death experiences. Their consciousness is surviving somewhere outside their body. Where is that? That somewhere that their consciousness went while they were stone cold dead is by definition an afterlife. They survive there without oxygen, without blood, all those things. I can't get on to the next one, remove. I don't know what's going on there. Did I lose you again? No, I'm still on.
Yeah, we're still on. And at some point, if you'd like to put your video on as well, if that's easy for you to do.
Video go up, okay. I don't know how that happened. That's okay. All right, so let's go back to the show. I've still got to remove Charlene Banks up there. I don't know if you guys see that, but escape. I'll try to get rid of that. Remove. Okay. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. I'm trying to get rid of that stuff. Okay, so here we go. Back to playing. Okay. We went through this slide already. Okay, we're going down to the next slide. Okay, there's one idea that postmortem consciousness survival is a proven scientific fact, changes everything. So those of you that the interview with, if you're interested in this interview of me with Dr. Sheen, with Anthony Sheen, on that video right there, you can copy this, take a picture of this. Science and Postmortem Survival, that's me being interviewed by Jeff Mishlove on August the 6th of 2020. And the interview that we showed with Robert Kuhn and Dr. Sam Parnia a little bit earlier is right there on that one. You might want those. My books are no longer available from Amazon because due to COVID, the company that was publishing them for me went out of business. And I haven't decided to, I don't make money off these books. I just put them out for people. So I'm putting out a different book now because time has moved on. It's now 2022. And the last one, the red one there was 2016. And things have moved on. And so we have to revise things. But if you find them out there, like my death experience, it tells you how I got started in all this. And that's what I got to say. Now we want to do questions and answers. So I'm going to take that off the screen and I'm going to go back to just the end.
So, some of our members may not be familiar with your near-death experience. I wonder if you could tell us about that.
Yeah. Okay, I'm trying to get back to a full screen here, but I can't quite seem to get there to a full screen. I'll tell you about my near-death experience, okay? In 1970, some of you think that was ancient history, a long time ago, more than half a century ago. I had a motorcycle wreck and I ended up in the hospital for 33 days. I was in a coma. I had a near-death experience. They didn't know what to call it then. And I went to the other side. A lot of people talk about going there, having the life review. I sort of woke up there with the light. And it was obvious we'd already done my life review because we were talking about the future, where we're going, and that sort of thing. And I really felt when I was there with the light that I was home. The light never described who they were. They didn't need to because I knew them. The people say, well, I saw Jesus or I saw Krishna, or no, that's not so. The light doesn't identify that way. And, but I got the message, just a little while, and you have to go back, and just a little while you can come here again. And that little while has been 52 years, so okay, we're waiting a little while. But that was the message I got. So I didn't want to come back here. No way that I wanted to come back to this life. And then I definitely recall re-entering the body, and I saw flames, candles, and very few people remember the re-entry. I came in somewhere around the head and slammed into the body, back into the pain of this existence. When you're in a near-death experience, you feel no pain. When you come back, it wasn't the pain of my injuries, it was the pain of this existence. And when we pinch our finger like that, it's pain that you're feeling. You don't push real hard, but you're feeling with is pain. And this whole existence is made of pain. So that's what I remember on re-entering. I have some other lectures that I give where I talk about seeing the same colors as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, coming back in, how the colors changed, and how the veil drops down, and then the kind of like the blood comes on top of it, the same colors. And all of that remains very vivid for me, exactly what that was. But it told me that consciousness survives death, which is why I later took up studying mediumship. And I literally, once a month, I bring in 3 to 5 spirits and talk to them. And the only explanation that makes any kind of elegant scientific explanation for that is that the spirit is talking to me. That their soul is there talking to me from across the divide. Any other questions?
Yeah, we're waiting for some questions to come in. So I would encourage everybody, please, if you want to raise your hand and ask it or audibly, or if you would rather type it up, we can take questions there. You're a physicist. What is your background?
Okay, my background is I spent my life designing. I'm a naval architect, marine engineer, and designed ships. I used all of the normal physics, hydrodynamics, and everything to do all this work. And I use what materialists would call physics, the 3D plus time that we live in. And when I first came out after having my near-death experience, and I would say, there's a whole lot more that we don't see here. And everybody would kind of laugh at me and say, so if you actually died, where did you go? Where is that? Well, they're thinking in space time. Then I have a where, okay, a where, a space, and the afterlife exists just like radio waves, the same place we are. So then in 1998, they launched the Hubble telescope, and they discovered dark energy and dark matter. And the physicists realized, the astronomers discovered that. And then the physicists looked at it and said, well, that means that 96% of the universe we cannot discern with our current methods, our very crude apparatus and our 5 senses. We can't discern 96% of the universe. We're only seeing 4% of what we call light energy rather than dark energy. And yet people clinging to their religious belief in materialism will say, well, we're sure that the afterlife and all those things that we don't like don't exist in the 96% we can't even discern. So whatever you don't like isn't out there in the dark energy. But to me, that just explained everything. Just like I knew when I came back from the near-death experience, that our science only covers this little piece of the whole thing. And so in 1998, 28 years after I had the near-death experience, I was kind of vindicated by the dark energy. So, but I made my life as a practical physicist, making things work, creating naval architect, building ships. I've done tankers, I've done passenger vessels, I've done cargo ships, and I've done a lot of military vessels. The Navy particularly is where I've spent a lot of time. Served in the Navy in the Vietnam War before I had the near-death experience, and I've served the Navy a lot afterwards. So that's what I did with most of my life. I studied physics in college, and but my 50 years of my avocation has been to study consciousness.
What do you make of quantum physics? I mean, that's somewhat related to what you studied at college. I mean, do you think that it still has a very long way to go? Or, I mean, as a physicist...
Quantum electrodynamics agrees with consciousness being the basic substance of the universe. There's a whole group of people, scientists, who call themselves post-materialist scientists, who believe that the basis of the universe is consciousness. Max Planck, who gave us the quantum, said in 1900, the matrix of matter is mind, meaning that the basic matrix on which matter is founded is consciousness. Now that's 1900. All of the physicists, Heisenberg, Schrodinger, de Broglie, Dirac, all of them immediately as they got quantum electrodynamics, and that's what you should call it, quantum electrodynamics, and not quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics sounds like it's material, like it has levers and it's mechanics. It's not. It's quantum electrodynamics. It's totally invisible. And as physicists, we know that, like, you're sitting on a chair, what's really there? A bunch of electrons, an electric field. It's mostly empty. Your backside is sitting on that chair, and you're made out of a bunch of electrons, and you're mostly nothing. There's nothing there. 99.99% is nothing, but we feel it like it's solid. You know, I can't put my hand through my hand, can I? I can't put my hand through the wall. These are electromagnetic forces that create fields, but the fields are like radio waves. So there's really no wall behind me, and I'm not really here, and I'm not really sitting on the chair. As physicists, we say it's all an illusion. Space and time are illusions. Okay, and that goes along with our consciousness. We put all that together. You have to, that's a whole nother, the question you asked, there's a whole nother 2-hour lecture.
Would you say that consciousness is the sort of 21st century word for what previously has been called the soul?
Yes, but it's also what was previously called the luminiferous ether. Consciousness is what everything's made out of. The entire world is consciousness in physical expression. Consciousness is like the soul, but we're one soul with the whole universe. The birds outside, we're part of them. They're a part of us. There's no separation. And that's the biggest problem that people have. They want to separate. I'm here and you're over there. I'm on the West Coast, you're on the East Coast. Wait a minute. No, we're not. We just think that. We just put that together. It's the consciousness is the universe. And we create everything that we see physically. Some of it we do jointly with each other. After all, our consciousnesses are connected. And so we can have something like, I'm going to get on the jet and fly to Washington, okay, DC. That's our consciousness. We do that together. It's collective consciousness. It's all of us doing this.
So there's a collective consciousness, but would you not also say that we have our own unique consciousness, even though we're all...
Yes, and what we see in our head is totally subjective. We reach out and we feel something, When you look at what your eye does, it takes in a light and it transmits it to your brain, and you see a picture, and you look what's really happening there physically. It's everything that we think we know is out there is actually in here. That's a big problem that everyone has. They think, well, there's really an objective reality out there. I can feel it. I can touch the table. I can sit on my chair. I know it's out there. Well, the real truth is we just think it's out there. This is what Einstein had a hard time, and he said to the other physicists, he said, so what you're saying is, you guys, if we all stop looking at the moon at the same time, everybody stops looking at it, it'll just disappear because it's just appearing there for our consciousness. And the quantum electrodynamics physicist said, yeah, that's what we're saying.
Isn't it a little bit like the Jesuits saying that if a tree falls in the forest?
Yeah, there's no sound.
There's actually no sound.
There's somebody there to hear it. And first off, there would be no tree. Okay, there would be no forest. And yes, there would be no sound.
Yes, absolutely. We have a question here from Carmen. What a fascinating presentation, she says. Based on these profound findings about the continuation of consciousness after physical death, what can we do on a daily basis to incorporate this awareness into our lives? What principles should we embrace?
Well, the best thing you can do as an individual is meditate. And meditation is not just sitting in the corner sucking your thumb. Meditation is going inside. And when you realize that our consciousness creates the universe, you need to go inside and connect with that. And to do that, the difficulty that we have is shutting off the ego, shutting off your analytical mind, shutting down the part of you. And to me, it's shut down the engineer, turn on the medium. You have to shut down that part of you that doubts and thinks, well, I've got to fix it all. That ego, that consciousness that says, nothing's going to happen unless I do something, it's got to shut down. And when that happens, then you go inside and you get very deeply inside. You discover things that some people are afraid to go in there. They discover who they are, what they are, and how they're connected to the universe. It doesn't happen the first day. You need to meditate regularly. I particularly get up at 3 o'clock in the morning so I can talk to certain spirits on the other side. It works better at that hour because they're in the shadow of the earth, and there's something to do with that. The energy that they're coming through is affected by light. People like to hold seances in the dark, and why is that? Is because it's affected by the light, and it's a dark energy, and the light energy affects it. So I do my meditation at 3 a.m. and go back to bed and sleep some more. Works very well for me. Individuals want to meditate at different times of the day, whatever works for you, but you have to go inside, and you have to learn to shut off the analytical ego. At Arthur Finley College, I had a teacher. I didn't even like that teacher. She liked to make pyramids out of sticks out in the woods. I mean, she was really weird. But she taught me one thing, and that was to shift from the status of your analytical mind to your spiritual side. Is just a shift like that, and you can learn to just do it. And so if you meditate, you'll learn how to eventually get there by snapping your fingers. And that's what mediums do. We go into deep meditation while we're still talking to you. Okay, we just go into very deep meditation, and we pick up stuff from the other side. It comes through to us. We turn on our sixth sense. Well, your sixth sense is always operating. You just don't know it. You get a gut feeling, oh, no, I shouldn't do this. Or it's happened to all of us. The phone rings, but we just thought of Susie, and she calls us on the phone. Oh my goodness. Well, there you are. How does that happen? That's your sixth sense. Sometimes your sixth sense will say, don't get on that airplane, and the airplane crashes, you know. We all have this. We just don't believe it, most of us, in the world out there. Lucky me, I had a near-death experience. I got killed when I was 21 years old. I mean, that's lucky. People kind of don't get that when I say it. I was lucky. I got killed in a motorcycle wreck. Two things they can't handle there. One, lucky, and two, he got killed, but he's still here. They can't handle that statement. It doesn't fit in their picture of reality that they're trying to force on reality. And that's why you have to shut off your analytical mind. You got to shut it off. And you got to move from the heart. And if you can feel it that way, moving from the heart, I feel all the stuff I get from the other side. I get some pretty good evidence. And that's, going to Arthur Finley, nobody pays for me to go over there. It's in England. Nobody reimburses me for that. And I don't charge for doing mediumship. I did for a while because people just demanded I give them readings. I said, okay, pay me for my time. But I got a lot of trouble from the world out there, people that don't believe.
I have several questions, and we have some more questions also. When you say you get up at 3 o'clock and you talk to specific spirits, and whatever you're comfortable sharing, what sort of interactions are you having with them? Are you asking for guidance? Who is that lady?
That's Helen. That's who I talk to. She's my mother-in-law. She died 25 years before, or she died 5 years before I met her daughter and married her daughter. And if I go to a medium and I sit down, the medium will say, that lady that's over your left shoulder, is her name Helen? And if they've already heard of Helen, because I talk about her like this, then she'll show up as her middle name instead of her first name. And so that's who I talk to a lot. And she brings me all kinds of stuff. And she tells me, I represent a whole conglomerate of people over here that are working with you. But basically, that person talks to me. She's the medium on that side. And so if a spirit comes and wants to communicate, they go to her. She knows how to read me. She's told me apparently we spent a lot of time together in prior lifetimes. So, but she makes me feel, she knows how to make me, my soul, feel something. And I can come up with it. One time I was doing the reading, and I got a bunch of accurate things for this woman that I was doing the reading for. And then I said, and the guy, he liked basketball. And she said, no, he didn't like sports at all. So later I asked Helen, I said, what was that about with the basketballs? And she said, well, the only basketball player you ever knew in your life was John Sigma of the Seattle Sonics. And you knew him, and his name's Jack. And I was trying to give you the name for her guy. Well, so then I went back to that sitter, and I said, I brought your fiance through that died, and what was his name? Was it Jack? And she said, no, it was Jacques. So there you are. That's the kind of thing. I get these symbols, and so that's what I do. I talk to Helen at 3 a.m, and I get an awful lot of stuff.
And you touched on past life as well, because you said that with your mother-in-law who died 5 years before, I think you met your wife, is what you said. So you have a connection. So clearly you're open to the idea of past life. So your philosophy of this particular lifetime for you personally is what? What do you think?
It's just part of the ongoing saga. Consciousness existing outside of body, outside of the physical, must then be continuous. So we're all living for eternity. Consciousness exists. How it materializes in a past life or in a future life, I don't have all the details, because, as Helen often says, when you're in the physical, you can't know everything, or you would just bail. You'd get out of the physical. Everyone would quit. You're there to learn lessons, and you need to work through those lessons You chose to come into the physical, so you did. And when you do that, you lose all of when I came in back from the near-death experience, the flames, a lot of people say that is the annihilation of your excess consciousness, which you had on the other side as you come back into the physical. And so that's what those flames were. And we choose to come into this life. How we do that, I can't see it from here. If I was on the other side, I could probably see it a lot better, but I'm over here right now. I'm in the physical.
Okay. All right, so we have another question, and that is, how did you begin to study mediumship? This is from Olivia. How did you begin to believe that you were able to do this?
When I had the near-death experience, I came back, and right away I'm feeling everybody in the room and reading their mind, and I'm, oh my God, I can't do this, and got to go back to college and finish and go get a job and everything else. So I had to turn it all in like this and hold it in and kind of shut it down because I had this reading everybody's mind kind of thing going on. So I shut it down. And then as I approached retirement, after having a career like everyone does and spending all my time studying, remember when I started, we didn't have the IANDS. They came along 8 years later. And it took me a while to even discover IANDS. I found out about them about early 1980s. And so I held all this in. And when I got towards retirement, I said, okay, now I'm going to talk to the other side. I'm going to pull this stuff back out. And I began doing tarot readings and letting the other side talk to me through tarot. And they just pull a card, answers to things. And I was fascinated with that. Tarot is just a fascinating thing. And so then I decided to study mediumship. So I was afraid of the spiritualist church. I didn't know what they were doing. What do the spiritualists do? They study dead bodies? What are those weird people? So I signed up for the Morris Pratt extension course that the spiritualists have without becoming spiritualists. And I finished, graduated, and of course, as I'm finishing the course, and it was a long, you got to read 40 or 50 books. It was really hard. It's much easier now. They've revised it. But I studied all that. And one of the things you need to do as a medium has a place to practice. And they said, okay, so you're going to graduate from our course, but usually everyone that takes the course is already a member of a spiritualist church somewhere. You ought to join a spiritualist church. So I finally got enough courage to go to a spiritualist church. And within a year, I'm up on the platform and giving them messages as a medium, which in the church service, they have what's called spirit greetings. And a medium gets up and shares what they're coming through. That's when Mary Franklin's, what I was talking about there, I did that on a Wednesday night at Golden Gate Spiritualist Church in San Francisco. And Michael Franklin is the current president of the congregation. And I brought that through, and Franklins know that I'm telling you all of this, that picture and everything. And I get that kind of information all the time for people. Well, that's how I started. In 2013, I did my first time on the platform. And then everybody said, you got to go to college. So I started going there in 2014. And so that's kind of how I got started in it. I knew from my near-death experience that we don't die. And I shared this with a person who was dying of Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS. And I shared it with her in 2012 at a birthday party for her while she and I were in the kitchen. And I said, Barbara, when you're dead, you're not going to be dead. I got to tell you this. And she said, Alan, I get it. I know about your near-death experience, and I get it. And her husband was a psychiatrist, didn't believe any of this stuff. And he was coming into the room, and I thought she was saying, I get it, to just make me be quiet. But then when I was at Arthur Findlay College the first time, at the first church service I went to, where they did someone on the platform, and they do it differently in Europe than they do here. Simone Key, the chief instructor, who didn't know me from Adam, got up and she was reading. I've later had classes with her, and I've done Zoom one-on-ones with her and everything later. But at the time, Simone didn't know me from Adam. And she brought through Barbara, okay, but she didn't bring through by name. She said, I have this woman who died of a disease way worse than multiple sclerosis. And she was in a wheelchair and she died in her 50s or 60s. And she brought her through like that. And Barbara came through and she, some people tried to, that had some Parkinson's disease people, they tried to claim she said, no. She went back and Barbara told her from the other side, it's a man. He knows that we've modified the house for my disease. And finally, I raised my hand and said, okay, I can take all the evidence. And Barbara came through. I never expected to hear from Barbara. She said, and the medium said these words. She said, Alan, thank you so much for telling me I wouldn't be dead when I died. It saved me so much time on this side. And we were sitting there and I couldn't even give you a cookie. She was totally paralyzed, clear up to her head. And she's sitting in a wheelchair like this and the cookies are sitting on the counter between us. And here's this medium in England saying to me, I couldn't give you a cookie. The evidence was overwhelming. And of course I teared up and everybody in that room got the message. And this is why I do it the same way. It's called indirect. We let spirit, out of all the audience, we let spirit pick the best story that's going to come through. And then we say, okay, I've got Susan here. She's somebody's grandmother. I've got Susan, she's somebody's grandmother, and she died in 1950. Who can take that? And somebody raised their hand and said, that's my grandmother. Okay, and that's how we do it. It's called indirect. It's letting spirit, I'm just a telephone, it's letting spirit decide who the call is going to come through for.
Okay. Thank you for that. This is a question from Maureen. Are you happy with what you're doing? Do you feel that you have found your purpose or that this is part of your building on your purpose?
It's part of building on my purpose. I don't think any of us will identify our purpose till we're finished, what the total of it is. You know, you look back and say, oh my God, you can see how you got to a place, but yeah, what's your total purpose? I feel very much that me sharing what I know about consciousness is a big part of my purpose. Yes, I do. But what my final total purpose is, I don't have an answer to that. I'm very comfortable with what I'm doing. One of the things I do provide for the world is somebody who's, I hold a lot of positions in the naval architecture, marine engineering. I write a lot of the standards. I work as an expert witness in court. 43 times I've been qualified as an expert and have to sit there and give testimony. I'm very well respected in the world of science and engineering. And I'm perfectly happy telling the world, hey, consciousness is real and I'm a medium and I talk to the other side. It's not something you want to do when you're 20 years old. You might be laid off from the company you're working for. But I'm very comfortable with it now. What can they do to me? I'm 73. Okay.
We have another question from Charlene. Do you believe that mediums are aware of higher dimensions beyond our 3D world? Could that be the place in quotes that we go when we die and the place that these spirits dwell?
Okay, so the spirits on the other side, the majority that talk to us are in what I would call the fourth dimension. Okay, there's 7 levels on the other side. I have be shortly talking about exactly what that's like and why we believe there's 7 levels. But if you look at string theory, you have 11 dimensions and it all works out. But the fourth dimension is where most of them are hanging out at the moment. Then there's a dimension above that. So when they first die, they go to the fourth dimension and they may remain a poltergeist, keep bothering people because they don't want to move on. And they still think that they're part of this existence. Then we have the next level above that where when they've figured it out and decided to move on, then it's kind of an instruction area. It might be what the Catholics would have tried to describe as purgatory, but it's not that's not a good description, but it lets you know where that level is. I'll call that the fifth dimension. And in the sixth dimension, it's what St. Paul in 2 Corinthians 12, he talks about, he knows a guy that went to the third heaven. And the third heaven is what spiritualists call Summerland. It's where most people who have got their stuff together and figured things out will end up. They're mostly good spirits at that point. And that's where a lot of them are talking to us from. But beyond that, as Helen says often, we can't even see what's going on in the next couple of levels above that. All we know is from everything we can determine from string theory of quantum dynamics, and from all of the traditions, the Kabbalah, all the things we go back through, there's 7 levels, and above that's Ein Sof, or God, or the ultimate consciousness, whatever you want to call it. I hate using the word God because that has so many connotations to so many religions. What I'd rather do is say the conscious universe. That's what is created all of this, makes all of this. Our consciousness is the creative tool. And another way to look at it is God is experiencing through each of us, if you can see it that way. God wants to know what everything feels like. He wants to be the murderer and the murderee. He wants to know both sides of everything. He wants to know what it feels like. What can our consciousness do? And that's a tough one. So for some people, they say, you mean God lived within Hitler, Putin? That's a tough one. People say, well, they don't deserve that. No, that's not the way life works. A tree grows up, and some trees get hit by lightning, other trees get run over by a truck, and the plant dies. Is that fair? And we're the same way. Is that fair? We're always worried about this, our analytical mind saying, is it fair? Well, if you have eternity and you die in this lifetime and you're going to come back again, I guess it's pretty fair.
Does you believe in reincarnation or multiple lives, life between lives, as it were, and past life regression and that kind of thing? But let me ask you, with these different dimensions, does one go, when one closes one's eyes here in this lifetime, you go to one of those dimensions? Is that based on your sort of level of frequency where you left off when you died here? You go to a particular level of frequency, and does that actually change? Do you sort of, continue to graduate and move upward in your evolution with your past over lifetimes, or can you regress, as it were, to an earlier level, or is it a linear evolution that one continues to go sort of towards the 7th dimension?
Well, hopefully it would be linear progression to the higher dimensions. We all live in karma, and that's the best term I can use for it. We live in a way that we are. And on the other side, it's really this way in the first 2 or 3 levels. People congregate with other people of the same karma. So all the Baptists are in one room and all the Methodists are in another room. You can put it that way. So you can see what I'm saying. People of the same karma kind of come together. So the thieves are over there stealing from each other. The murderers are over there killing each other. I mean, it's the karma. You go with people of the same karma. The thing that changes, that's so amazing to everybody, and really when they finally get it, ESP, everything's by ESP. You don't talk anymore. You just read the other person's mind. You use your 6th sense. And so a person who has a criminal intent, everybody can read their mind. You can't get away with it. So pretty soon they're all congregated over there, all the other criminals. It's like that. You're separated. You can progress or not progress. It's sort of up to you. I don't really understand that whole concept of the free will of it's up to you. But from everything that we get back, it's apparent that those everyone goes through an extended life review. And I call this remorse and restitution. It's not hell. It's not purgatory. It's where they have to look at their lifetime as if they had two blueprints, the one they could have been and the one they were. And they have to look at the difference. And some people can't hardly stand to do that looking, and it takes them a while. And so it may be a while before they communicate back. And sometimes people say, I've been trying to talk. I go to mediums all the time, and my great grandfather really wanted to talk to. He just won't come through. I don't know why. Maybe he's struggling with those things. So that's just something that does go on in those levels. They have to resolve things. Restitution is the hardest one of all. They have to go back and try and make up with the person that they did these things to. So that's the hardest part, apparently, what you could have done versus what you did do.
So did you say just a moment ago that if someone's grandfather isn't coming through and they want them to, that perhaps grandpa is on a level where grandpa is still sort of trying to understand and trying to evolve, even though he's on the other side, he's in one of those dimensions that's not elevated?
You don't suddenly become all wisdom and wonderful and change for the better just because you died. People think, well, then you have all knowledge, and no, sorry about that. This is an ongoing evolution. It's just the next stage of this life that we're moving on to. And maybe we come back again, and maybe we don't.
So when people, in some of the classic near-death experiences where they've actually crossed to the other side and they feel that they're in beautiful meadows or a wonderful city of gold and they see Jesus, what do you think that they're actually experiencing, and which of those levels might they be experiencing? What we would...
Go ahead. If they're coming back here, they haven't gone very far.
Okay.
That's just a reality. Different people have different experiences, and a lot of their experience is unfortunately colored by their beliefs. This is why I say the Baptists are in one room, the Methodists are in another. They go over there expecting what they're expecting. One of the hard things, Barbara, who came back and talked to me from that side that I talked about, her, the lady who died from ALS, she said, I'm already working with, she said to the medium that day, I'm already working with people, helping them get across when they come to that side. When Frederick Myers was one of the members of the Society for Psychical Research who died in 1901, and he knew Oliver Lodge. When Oliver, he did a lot of stuff from the other side. Oliver Lodge and him worked on this side together in the Society for Psychical Research. And Fred died in 1901. When Oliver Lodge's son, one of his three sons, died in 1915 after Oliver Lodge had already published that he believed the afterlife was real. Raymond died, and Raymond came through in 11 days. And why? Because Frederick went and found Raymond because he knew Raymond had died. Now, I don't know how that works on the other side, but Frederick, who'd been over there for 15 years, and time runs differently in two places, came over and found his friend's son and helped him get it together so he could talk back within 11 days. And this was important because one of the things that Raymond said is, Mom and Dad, you're going to get a picture. And it's got me sitting right in front of my friend. The picture was taken just before I passed. And the picture showed up on the 16th day or something after he died, but it came through in 11 days. So he could tell them that the picture's coming. And so that's the kind of thing that goes on over there. It's hard for some people to wake up because they're waiting for Jesus to come by and give them a gold harp and they can go sit on a cloud. Well, I'm sorry, that's not what's going on. And so they'll sit there and not talk to any of the other spirits. They think that they're evil spirits coming at them, and they'll sit there. Other people have other impressions of how it's supposed to be. And then there's the one that happens to many people. They think when you die, it's all over. That's it, black, no more, nothing. So obviously, because they're still having consciousness, because they're still having consciousness, they couldn't possibly be dead, could they? So they're not ready to move on because they're not dead yet. And those are the ones that kind of hang around. A lot of them become poltergeists. They stay in their house and they bang rock things and make noise and everything. Why are these squatters living in my house? Because you've been dead and the house has been sold. Sorry about that, and they haunt the place. And that's where some of this stuff comes from, is people who aren't ready to realize you're dead. And that's what Barbara said. Ellen, thank you so much for telling me I wouldn't be dead when I was dead.
Because that saved her a great deal of work, I think is what you said earlier.
Oh yeah, great deal of work. She said her estimate was, I think, 2 years of time anyway. But time's different over there, so you can't.
I wonder what she would have experienced had she not believed what you said about her actually not dying.
Well, she was of the Jewish faith, and I've been to their house for Seder meals and otherwise, and she would have not believed that they don't. The afterlife is not so well talked about in most of the Jewish Orthodox religion. There are some people who do talk about it a lot, and do believe in it. But she would have. Her words, "You saved me a whole bunch of time," and that's the thing. People come over there and they arrive there totally unready to be there, and the thing that they have the toughest time with is finding people who are ready to help, who can work with the people coming across, who have been taught by our Western thinking, our Western idea that you have a single lifetime and then it's all over and it turns black. Those people are the hardest ones to wake up and to get them moving on to the next place. They could sit there for 20 years in a stupor.
So really, how evolved we are spiritually, how evolved we allow ourselves to become, the more we work at it, the better the preparation, I guess. Once we pass to the other side, we would potentially then go up some dimension.
You would come right to the third heaven. That's what St. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 12. He's talking about his own near-death experience. He does it in the third person, but he says, I know a man 14 years ago. And he's talking about, in Luke, it talks about, he saw the light on the road to Damascus. But when he talks about it in 2 Corinthians 12, he actually talks in the third person. He says, I won't boast about me, but I know of a man. And what he's really saying is, like most near-death experiences, I don't boast about me. I don't want to tell anybody what happened. We have to come out of that. And it takes a while. So that's good to read. But basically,
you take it essentially. Right. Yeah, the more spiritually, that you take it with you, essentially.
Yeah, you go straight to the third heaven. That's what the spiritualists call Summerland. You don't have to go through the stuff in between. The more advanced you are, the easier it is when you get to the other side. That's what Barbara was saying. That piece of information helped me so much. And people just need to become spiritual, go inside, meditate, find out about yourself, get in touch with spirit, get in touch with God within.
But essentially believe, and a lot of people don't, yes.
No, they don't believe there's a God. They think this whole thing just happened out here. It's an accident.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So we have a final question from Olivia. Do you believe that traumatic events that people go through are to guide them to awareness of all of this, whether that be a real life event or an NDE? I typically find that people usually go through a distinct turning point that brings them to a certain awareness. What do you think the purpose of this is?
Well, we're here for learning, and that's the purpose of it. Every obstacle that you get in front of you. And some people say, oh, why does this keep happening to me? Because you haven't learned a lesson. Look at the obstacle, figure it out, and everything they go through, traumatic, whatever. We didn't come to this lifetime here to just have pleasure and enjoyment. We came here to learn, and to learn requires overcoming obstacles. And so every obstacle that you're placed in front of you you should be thankful for. You say, oh, great, I get another lesson. I get to learn. I'm here in that college called the physical life, and I get another chance to learn something. And that's why I came here. That's why I chose to come here, was to learn these lessons. And so I'm learning them. And when I've learned all of them and it's time for me to go, I'm out of here. Most people, oh, can I just live a little longer, a couple more days? I'm out here the minute it's ready to go. And I came back from the near-death experience with that. He said, no, just a little while and you can come back over here. And it's, like I said, it's been 52 years.
Well, we're almost out of time. Would you like to wrap up and do you have any final words?
My final words is science has proved that the afterlife is real. Dig into the stuff that my references and things that were there, that you took pictures of my slides. Dig into it. Science has proven the afterlife is real, and there's no doubt about it. And then that dovetails with all of our mediumship and everything else, and our people who remember past lives, the children at the University of Virginia who remember past lives, what Brian Weiss is doing of retro hypnosis to bring people back to, and there's retrogression stuff. There's a lot of fake people out there that say, oh, yeah, we regressed you and found out that you used to be Napoleon. Great. And your wife was Cleopatra. Oh, great. How much do I owe you for that? There's a lot of fraud out there, but there are real people like Brian Weiss who just stumbled into this without wanting it. And they tell you about people who have memories of their past life that they can bring out by hypnosis, just like the children remember past lives. And that's got to tell you, one, reincarnation is real. Two, consciousness survives outside a body. Everything comes together all of a sudden like that. Most of the religions wanted to tell us this, but they got into speculating and they wrote books. And as soon as you write it down, like my sister says, as soon as you write it down, it turns to shit. So organized religion is a bad thing because it's organized. And you need to be spiritual yourself. And it's a free way of being spiritual, not in some organized thought system. So that's what science says. And so I avoid organized religion. Yeah, I do mediumship with spiritualist churches. They're the ones that do that. A lot of the organization doesn't like me because I'm so disorganized.
I would say that what I'm walking away from having you present this afternoon is the idea of the consciousness really replacing the religious idea of the soul, and how we're able to prove that. But of course, we're so scientific and we need proof, and so this is now almost the modern day proof for us to really take that concept away. But a couple of centuries ago, people would have accepted that, but we've had to sort of go this particular path after rejecting religion to do it the scientific way. We're doing it our way, and a lot of people are starting to believe it. So it's interesting how it's just been a different journey, but to essentially the same destination in the 21st century.
The philosopher's stone is to put together science and religion, and that's what we've done.
Absolutely. Well, we're out of time. I want to say thank you so very, very much for a delightful and amazing presentation. And we wish you the very, very best. And thank you again.
You're welcome. And so.
Yeah. Okay, so everybody, we're going to have a break in September, but we'll be back towards the end of October with our next presentation. Enjoy the next few weeks. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay.